Welcome to Grand Sumo Breakdown,
the unofficial sumo podcast
for official sumo fans. Welcome to Grand Sumo Breakdown. This is Jake.
This is Mac.
And today we are joined by another Jake, Jake Book out of Ohayo Sumo. Jake, how does it feel to have the best first name in online sumo production?
It's an honor that you have to bear with.
It is a burden sometimes, isn't it?
It can be a burden.
Geez. Okay,
it can be a burden.
We get enough of Ryan on the main shows and his. Just stop. Just stop it right now.
I mean,
it can be a burden when somebody comes up and wants to talk to you about State Farm insurance. And
that joke got old after like maybe 3 times, right?
Yeah, it's been years, as you probably know. Yeah.
Oh God, I started a new job this summer, and they provided a couple polos for me. Like a lot of office jobs.
Khakis.
And of course, one of them is just bright State Farm red. So I got a whole new office to go through the same joke again.
Yes. Yep.
Oh man.
I always said that like State Farm should pay out to all the Jakes of the world because we have done more to advertise for them.
Yeah, no kidding. God, it's so dumb. Like, why did that commercial have such an impact?
Or at least like give us a discount on insurance. Like if our name is Jake
or whatever the stupid Jake
yeah,
is.
Exactly. Exactly.
So yes, I suppose Mac, we can talk about stuff that you like too.
Yes, let's do sumo. I like sumo.
Let's start with sumo.
I like
Jake,
sumo.
why don't you give us a little bit of your background? We did just talk recently with Ben and Darius from out there in Ohio, but yeah, you're the other major player in that scene. Tell us how you got your started and what you guys do around the club.
So I told this story a little bit on the Sumo Kaboom podcast, but I'll give you guys the kind of condensed version. I saw sumo on TV at my grandparents' house when I was a boy of probably 9-ish, and Musashi Maru was wrestling, and I was just like, this is really cool. And but it was the late 90s, so internet wasn't what it is now, and so I didn't really know how to like follow up on this newfound interest, so kind of forgot about it. And then fast forward about 10 years, when I was 18, I saw a commercial on TV and it had like a sumo wrestler in it, like lifting up a car or something, like the front end of a car.
Yeah, just enough to pique your memory there.
Like,
just enough to jog. Yeah, just enough to jog my memory. And so I got online and like I just fell all the way to the bottom of that rabbit hole pretty quickly. And then I'm just kind of I'm a person that if I see something that is interesting to me, I'm kind of like, well, I want to try to do it,
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
So I went home and like I had some friends that I had a friend that I played music with, and I was like, hey, we should sumo wrestle. And like he was like okay, whatever. So we went to a park, we filmed it somewhere. This film exists, I don't know. But we went to a park, and this is like 2010, the beginning of 2010. And we went to this park and we wrestled, and in our shorts, and it was like February in Iowa.
In the Midwest? February in the Midwest?
Yeah.
That's a gamble, sir.
Yeah, it was a gamble. It happened to be a decent day, but it was rough. And but anyway, and then I was just hooked. Like I wanted to do it. And so I started a club in Iowa in my little town, and we had about 5 people that came out regular every week. But I mean, I had no idea what I was doing. There was a couple videos of Trent Sabo online doing like, this is how you do Shiko and this is how you do this, but I had no formal, I had no wrestling background. I had anything. I didn't do anything. So I was really just kind of learning as I went. And yeah, we did that for about a year and a half or so, and then I moved away, and like nobody nobody there loved it as much as I did, and it was kind of like a thing to do. Um, so
You know, you kind of have to reach for that sometimes when you're
Yeah.
living in Iowa.
exactly. So it was a thing to do. It was a way for us to hang out.
Yeah.
And when I left, it they didn't do it anymore.
Mm.
So then I spent just years like every now and then like I'd meet somebody and I'd be like sumo and then I'd like do it with them like just no mawashi or anything, just like down to our shorts or whatever, and we'd wrestle
Mhm.
around a little bit, and I would try to like introduce people to it, and I wanted desperately to do it, but I just couldn't find anyone. And so then a couple years ago I was approaching 30, and I was like, man, if I am gonna do this, I should do it now because I'm just gonna get older and I'm just gonna,
Yeah.
um, so
You said the magic words like I'm approaching 30 like, oh.
oh
I
yeah,
remember that day.
exactly.
I remember that
Yeah.
day.
Yeah. And so you're like, well, if I'm gonna do something, like my body is like,
It's
I'm
already bad, and it's not
yeah,
going to get better.
exactly.
no, I've remained like fairly injury free, throughout my life. And
Nice.
so
Lucky
I was like,
you.
all right, I was like, I'm gonna do that, I'm gonna try to do this. So I got online and I noticed that there was a couple sumo groups, and I just posted on there and I was like, is anybody from Cincinnati area, like, would you want to get together and train? And Robert Foltz from Big Sumo Fan messaged me and said, you should get a hold of Darius Campbell. He's been training by himself for a couple of years and he competes, with the USSF. So I did that. Darius and I talked. This leads into the founding of Ohayo Sumo.
A plus plus.
Darius.
Yeah, I was about to
Gotta
say,
mention that.
fantastic. And the logo itself,
Mm,
beautiful.
mhm.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Well, that was Darius. So Darius had a pin in that name. He had an idea for a club that he wanted to start, but he just couldn't find anybody.
Sure.
So when I contacted him, we started talking, and we just really hit on a lot of the same values, like the things that we wanted the club to be about, and I think that really kindled our friendship right away. I mean, we just really hit it off. So that first practice was in his backyard, and we just like I came over, and Robert Foltz was there, big sumo fan. So Robert really is like the other founder, and so he came and filmed the practice, and he would say like hakioi, like when we
Yeah.
and it was awesome. It was like really it was just everything that I could have. I was like, yes, all right, I'm all in. Like
You found
all
your
the
sumo
money,
soulmate
Done.
there. Yeah.
yeah, all the chips are in. Like I'm ready to do this. And so uh we we just started, you know, doing our thing, and then we got contacted by another person down in Lexington, Kentucky, and our third recruit, our third guy our first recruit was this guy named Tony Dismukes, and Tony's like 50. Tony's in his late 50s, and has been a jiu-jitsu guy for years, and like he's just really good at really good um, student of martial arts, and so he came along, and so Tony was like our third guy for a while, and then it just sort of like
Kept
blossomed from
growing.
there. Yeah, and by the end of you know that was September of 2019, and a year later when we had our 1 year anniversary, I mean we had probably there was like 10 or 12 guys out there at that anniversary event. So we grew really fast. We grew through the pandemic. I mean, we basically said when the pandemic started, we had some people that were like, "All right, we want to be really conscious of this," and they sat out. So like Tony was one of them. Darius was even one of them. The rest of us were kind of like, we're going stir crazy, and this is like the only thing that is keeping us. This is the only thing that's keeping us like sane right now.
Yeah.
Is like sumo. So we just were like, everybody just like take your temperature ahead of time, and like, if you don't feel right about it, don't come. But like, it's kind of enter at your own risk situation, and
Yeah.
so we just
I
kept
suppose
going.
you get the benefit of like if it was a bigger sport than sumo, you might have to worry about crowd size, but like if you just got
Right.
the same couple guys every time.
Yeah, there was typically about four or
Lower
five
risk,
of us.
yeah.
Yeah, lower risk, and I mean, yeah, we just were like, well, there's no, we just felt like it was kind of a mental health thing for some of these guys, because some
Sure.
of our guys, and this might get a little philosophical about sumo, but I've talked at length with a couple of our guys about this, and I guess I want it to be on record somewhere, that this is
Are
like
you
a
sure you
thing.
want it with us?
Yeah, and you
Yeah,
picked
yeah,
this.
I
You
think
picked
so.
this interview.
You,
Oh,
you
man.
sure about this?
Yeah, I'm sure. I think I'm sure, but sumo's like sumo is really good for people. It's really good for people, and
Mentally, we
they're
should distinguish.
yeah, mentally, yeah, no,
Yeah.
it really is. And so like we had a guy, um, we have a guy in our club, and I won't, I'm not gonna
Yeah, no, you don't have to
I'm not
name
gonna
names.
name,
Sure, sure.
but we have a guy in our club, and a comment he made one time, he comes out to practice, he works really hard, and like he said to one of our guys one time that like, now this is a guy that's been involved in martial art groups for years. I mean, he's done this for a long time. But he said that our club and our group has really helped him with his like social anxiety, and like that's why he keeps coming out, because it's like he just really, it helps him, it helps him beyond wrestling. Is he going to
Yeah.
be a national champion? Probably not. Is he going to like, whatever, but that's not what, that's kind of never been what Ohayo Sumo has been about for us. Like it's beyond the actual competition part of it. The competition part
Sure.
is great, and we have a good time. We go and um, we have trouble getting guys out because a lot of our guys are, schedules conflict, and there's just
And we
reasons.
Life
don't
on
live in,
top of everything.
we don't
Yeah,
live in
life on-
Texas, so
Right,
we can't just
exactly.
like drive an hour and have a major
That
tournament.
too.
Exactly. But yeah, I think for us, like when you see guys grow in ways adjacent to sumo, so they're growing in sumo, but they're also growing in other avenues of their life. That's just like super rewarding to think that, we
You're contributing to that.
yeah, like we brought this thing into the world, and pushed it out of the womb, and now like it's here like affecting people's lives, and like
Yeah.
I never could have imagined that. Like for us it was just like we wanted to just do sumo and like have a good time. But that's kind of the way that we approach the club. Like we just want, it's kind of like what Matt Campbell says at Iowa State, it's like I just want these people, these young men that I have doing this thing, I want them from the time they're here to the time they leave to become the best version of themselves, See, as
Yeah.
he's always saying. And so that's what, I mean, that's really at the core, like what Ohayo Sumo, I think, means and like what it stands for.
Absolutely. Yeah, well,
and-
first off, excellent Iowa State name drop. We
Yes,
gotta have a couple
bravo.
in there.
Bravo, sir.
I Matt Campbell's my
Yes,
hero.
yes,
Yeah.
more.
Probably the only other Cyclone fan we've had on the show so far.
Yeah. Yes.
Second off, though, I really appreciate like the talking about like the social aspect of that. I imagine that like more so than other sports, sumo like step one is get almost naked in front of these people, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
So like it's got to be like a more
The full Mawashi.
regardless of what
Yeah.
sport you're competing in. If that's your outfit, it's got to be socially intimate to some level, right?
Absolutely.
So-
Yeah, and it is. And I think and I'll name this individual won't mind me dropping his name because we've we've talked about this at length. Um, but Dylan Biggs,
Oh yeah.
who competed down in Texas this weekend and got silver, our boy.
Yeah.
Way to go.
And
Sorry, not that I can show any partial favoritism, but I like the Biggs
Of course
brothers.
not,
So
of course
bravo.
yeah,
Bravo.
the Biggs brothers, they're my heroes in a lot of ways. But they like so Dylan, Dylan was like a standout athlete in high school. He played middle linebacker, and as a like 145-pound middle
Oh,
linebacker.
jeez.
Like
Okay.
that's how
Yeah.
he's intense. He's an
That says
intense
something
dude.
about his intensity. Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
he's an intense dude. And so Dylan got out of high school and like I don't know the whole story, but he went to West Point. He's a West Point guy, and because of his because of his injuries in football and his injuries when he was at West Point, and like he wasn't able to like go on to get his commission and do that. So he's thrown back into the real world, and he really struggled. He really struggled, and like that camaraderie of the army and like that camaraderie of like
Oh,
being
sure.
part of a unit
Mm-hmm.
just wasn't there anymore. And so he discovers sumo, and he tells his twin brother Nick, "Hey, like we should do this." And so they both get into it, and they contact us, and they start coming over to our practices. Well, eventually we were just like, you guys should just join Ohayo Sumo. Like you should just be part of our family because I loved what they brought to the table, and like I loved their energy at practice. And Dylan, but so to go along with all this is like, Dylan will tell you that like being part of this club and like being part of Ohayo Sumo has, literally saved him. Like because he was really struggling with that aspect, and like he went through some health issues during this period, but it was all like Ohayo Sumo was there to like lift him up and
Physically
so
and mentally.
physically and mentally. So, you know, and I think you see that across the board in other clubs too. Like I don't know everybody's stories, but you know,
There's a lot of
I
good ones
think
out there. Yeah.
yeah, I think that this sport in a unique way, in a really unique way that I think, I'm not trying to rag on any other martial arts or be like,
You can if
rag.
you like.
No,
Yeah,
so, hey,
but
go right
We won't
ahead.
feel bad. Yeah.
but
We're sumo
what
fans, so please
what
go ahead.
what I seem to notice is that a lot of other martial arts have kind of a toxic element to them.
Mhm.
There's and I'm sure it just depends on where you are and like who you're with and all that. But there seems to be, and I've heard this from other martial arts guys, like even guys that come out and do stuff with our club, that there does tend to seem to be a little bit of a toxic element to some of those other martial arts, and I think part of that is due to their size and how big those
Sure.
those groups are. Um, but you know, we haven't really experienced a lot of toxic people in the sumo world. There's a handful. There's people out there that you're like, oh, okay, but but
By
they
and
tend
large.
they tend to they tend to weed themselves out.
Sure.
They tend, because I think the community as a whole is like, that's not sumo. That's not what sumo is about. That's not what this community is about. And I think um that's a really, I don't know. I love this community across the board.
Yeah.
Um I love watching what other people are doing. I love just the camaraderie. I love that at the end of an event, you can battle so hard against these people, and then,
They're helping you
they're
up.
your
They're like,
buddies.
come on,
Yeah.
let's go.
Yeah.
On that note, I kind of want to just real quick call out Ketzel Jefferson in Texas. I watched a handful of highlights from the
We love you,
tournament this
Ketzel,
weekend.
but
There was a moment. It was an Instagram story. Ketzel had this excellent throw on another girl. I'm sorry, I didn't recognize who she was facing in that particular match. and it was like this awesome brutal throw. And
Ari,
before she
that was Ari.
but before she hits the ground, Ketzel's already like, "Oh gosh, are you okay? Let me help you back up." And I just thought that was like, yes, that is the specific thing about sumo that I've never seen in other sports to that level. And
Yeah.
I would say that, we could like write a book on the idea of like what makes sumo special and how it, what it's all about that makes it so intimate to all of us. But you're already doing that.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
Well, I hope I'm doing that. Yeah.
sorry, not to do a ham-fisted segue there, but I would really love to hear more about the book that you're working on, because what I've heard so far sounds really cool.
Sure. So it kind of there's not a lot of books about sumo in general. I mean, unless I'm probably in Japan, there's a lot, but somebody would need to translate them. And I'm hoping that because of the international fervor that's happening with sumo, I'm hoping a lot of those books would get translated into English at some point. Harumafuji has a biography that I would love to read, but
yes, please.
It's in Japanese, right? And probably in Japanese and Mongolian, and I can't read either of those languages. So
a little hard.
Yeah. But no, so I started talking to John Jacques on a pretty regular basis, and we would have these kind of epic phone conversations. And the more I learned about stuff from him, and like just it wasn't really that he was trying to like tell me a bunch of stories, but there were just like little snippets in the conversations where I was like, man, I want to know more. I want to go down that trail and like see where that goes. So I kind of came up with the idea. I was like, Americans, first of all, there's a lot of trolls on the internet, right? And there's a lot of these people that are kind of like, oh, American sumo, like it's so watered down and so cheesy, and like I want nothing to do with it, right?
Right.
But what they don't realize is just how rich, and some of them are Americans, which is odd to me. Like a lot of these people, they're also Americans saying this,
Yeah.
And so what they don't realize is that we have a really rich sumo tradition in this country. I wouldn't say that there's like, I wouldn't say that America has had a love affair with sumo, because that's certainly not, not accurate.
True.
Probably overblows the complete, the full extent of what we actually have here, right?
Right. Yeah. And I kind of say that I'm working on kind of the introduction of the book, and I kind of say that in the first chapter, that like I wouldn't call it a love affair, but we definitely have a tradition to draw on as Americans that goes back a lot further than people think.
Sure.
And so that story really starts with Commodore Perry landing, in Japan, his black ships coming into Japan.
Yeah. Modernizing Japan by force.
Modernizing Japan.
Classic America.
You need to go out, buddy.
Thank you. We were chatting a little bit before the interview, but yeah, I really appreciate you giving us some time here, because you got a whole lot more human to take care of than we do.
Oh, I do. Yeah. Yeah.
There's 5 kids in the house. I am impressed that you can set aside even an hour for us. Thank you.
Oh, it's okay. It's no worries. So Commodore Perry comes in, and he basically, it's kind of this like, gunboat diplomacy situation, right? It's like,
isn't that where that phrase originated?
I think so. Yeah, it probably is. So during the course of his visit there, he witnesses sumo, and you can read his journal accounts of it. And I'll give you just like a little snippet of his journal account. So
is this like primary source that you've dug up here?
Yeah. Yeah. This is awesome. from the writing of Perry.
Oh, sweet.
And so he says, let's see. This is a journal of the Perry expedition to Japan by S. Wells Williams on archive. You can find this
Oh,
stuff on archive.org. And so what he says about it is he says after the exhibition of the presents, the commissioners invited Perry out in front, and soon. Yeah, this is a adjacent account to the one that Perry writes. There is
okay.
a journal of the Perry expedition that I have a physical copy of, but so he says, and soon 90 naked rikishi, or athletes, paraded in front to show their brawn by carrying the bundles of rice in various ways. And there's actually a woodcut, like a block print of this event where you have a bunch of rikishi out on the beach, like carrying bales of rice.
Oh, wow.
Um, these fellows are trained to such feats and were all stout-limbed men, the biggest stripped to let Perry punch him in his paunch. They were brought they were brought to this village from Yedo, and we regarded it as a good sign that the commissioners should take some pains to amuse us. From this spot, the company repaired to the railroad, where the locomotive was soon ready to run its race around the ring, a spectacle which interested the natives greatly. On returning to the house, the company was seated facing the inner yard, where the strongest of the athletes were brought forward to exhibit their prowess. First, the whole body of them stood in a circle and went through a sort of drill or manual, slapping their breasts, rubbing their hands, armpits, and knees with other motions, after which they marched off. A
A
second
ring entering
company,
ceremony.
Yeah.
yeah,
That's
it sounds like
I
it.
know exactly what he's describing.
Exactly.
He's
I'm like,
just
oh my
Yeah.
gosh,
describing
that's
it.
a ring ceremony.
Yeah. A second company dressed a little with long fancy aprons, so Kesha Mawashi, um,
Yes.
then circled the ring, going through with similar motions. The match then began, two and two coming into the ring. First, squatting on their feet opposite each other, the two began to rub themselves with dirt on the palms and armpits, and then advanced to the center in a steady step.
A chirichozu.
A cheery chosen. Here, each stretched out one leg after the other, holding his knee with a close grip, planting his foot in the earth, so Shiko, with a heavy groan or grunt, several times again rubbing his hands in the gravel like a bull pawing the earth.
Huh.
All this took up a minute or more, and then each, seizing the other's shoulders, endeavored to push his antagonist over. One butted his head with all his force against the other's breast, while the other only tried to throw him by turning his body and generally succeeded in doing so. He coming to the ground with a thump that showed the force exerted.
What hey, real quick, I'm gonna do a little research in the background. Do you have a date
Yeah.
on this?
So this is 1850. This is 54, I think.
Wow.
53 or 54. I'd have to look and see what section of the book this is in to know for sure what date it is, because they were there for, they went several times in the course of that period.
I'm gonna do a little bit of research on Sumo DB, see if I recognize anybody from that far back. But yeah, keep going.
Sure thing. So they actually, in Perry's journal, he mentions the name of the wrestlers.
Oh wow.
And so that's where it begins. So that's like America's
cool.
That's first contact
Introduction.
with sumo. Yep.
In 1854, they had two tournaments, and in both of them at Komusubi was Unryu. One of the two guys credited with the Yokozuna entrance.
The rope style.
Yeah.
Okay, sure. Yeah. So Perry may have witnessed some of this, and that would be
smokes.
And that would be really so yeah, so that's the introduction, and it's so fascinating. And the way that Perry describes it in his journal, and you can tell that they kind of like look down their noses at this thing. They're kind of like, well, like it's entertaining, but
yes, these noble natives. I heard the
Yeah.
word natives.
Noble natives.
Yes.
Come on, man.
so
It's
these people
dated
are,
language.
yeah, these people are barbaric, but
But
so-
their naked sport amuses me.
yes.
Little
so-
did they know, 150 some years later, we're going, oh, we know what that is. I know what that is.
yeah.
Oh, man.
And what's funny is they at some point they brought there was guys on the ships that like wanted to like test their strength against the Japanese, right? And they just annihilated them. I mean, the Japanese just killed all these guys. And so you go from that to an article in a magazine called Belu's. What is it? Belu's.
Clues.
Yeah, Belu's
No,
Clues.
think that could be a little earlier.
Am I thinking of something
that.
different?
Belu's
Brothers?
magazine in the 1850s. It was called. Um, oh shoot, anyway, I have a cutting from this magazine, and
Okay.
there's an article in there about sumo wrestling. And as far as I can tell, it is the first, and like I said, unless I uncover something else, it is the first printed account of sumo wrestling in America.
That's awesome.
And I have an original copy of this that I have
Oh, that's awesome.
in a frame. But so that account is kind of goofy. I mean, it's kind of goofy. Like it's like they're describing something they have no idea. They're kind of basing it. They've obviously based it on some accounts that they've heard from Perry and like the trip to Japan.
Mm.
Um, so now we fast forward to you fast forward and like the history of sumo in America begins in Hawaii, even though Hawaii is not technically part of America yet.
Sure.
Right.
I have found articles from like the 1880s in Honolulu describing sumo. And for some reason they're not calling it sumo, but they're calling it Japanese wrestling. So if it's like prior to like if it's prior to like 1900, they're referring to it as like Japanese wrestling. Once they get the lingo by like 1900, sumo 1900 to 1920 and through the 20s and 30s, like sumo is exploding in Hawaii. They're having huge tournaments, thousands of people are coming out. They're having tournaments on, I'm finding articles like the emperor's birthday and they're having a tournament, you know. So it becomes like a really big affair. And all this information about these like sumo characters. One guy that I'll mention here, in the 1920s, this guy named um, Iwanoshin Matsunaga. That was his real name, but his wrestling name, and a lot of these guys that were in Hawaii would actually they treated it a lot like pro sumo in Japan. Uh, so he had his hair grown out, he had a top knot and everything. Um, and his ring name was Matsu Nomori, and everybody called him Chaplin.
Chaplin.
As a nickname after Charlie Chaplin.
Oh.
And yeah, and so
because he wore a bowler hat in the ring every time.
Yeah,
he swung a cane whenever he walked up, just waddling up to the ring, like, oh, here we go, a sumo win again.
That's right. So he was called that because he like was really funny and like he would make people laugh.
Okay.
And so anyway, he was a champ. He was like really a really good wrestler, and I've found articles from like when he retired from sumo and like stopped doing sumo, but he's like in a lot of ways he's kind of like um he's kind of the John Jocks character of his era. Like he started coaching afterwards, and he coached up a whole batch of like young wrestlers and really kept the sport alive in Hawaii. And you know, through the 30s, and then you have like the war years where there's really not much going on, but guys are still staying active. So like guys that were in sumo are now doing like Greco-Roman wrestling, and the newspaper articles will say like so and so, a decorated sumo wrestler, is now is facing against so and so in this Greco-Roman, you know. So they're still wrestling, but they're not doing sumo. And then after the war, a couple years after the war, they have a big revival tournament. And so they have like 10,000 people show up for this revival tournament. And so yeah, just like finding all this stuff, you know, there's American
sounds amazing.
and these are guys, you know, 1939, 1939, I found as far as what I don't think I'm pretty positive that like native born American dudes were sumo wrestling prior to this, but this is the first evidence that I've been able to like concrete.
Yeah.
Here they are. There's pictures of these guys in a 1939 article. Olson, Glover, and Lieutenant Friedman, and they were Americans who were stationed in Hawaii. And I have pictures of them, all three of them in their Mawashis, as white as you and me. Uh,
That is so
and
cool.
they're gonna compete in the tournament. And so we've got between all of that and then guys, guys that are wrestling in Japan, like from Hawaii, but also from the mainland. Like, did you know there was a guy that competed that became a pro sumo wrestler that was from San Antonio, Texas, in the late 1960s, early 70s.
Say what?
Yeah,
That's
from
cool.
San Antonio, Texas.
So I guess what you're getting at, though, most people will go back to, Konishiki was one of the first guys, or you research at another level, you'd be like, oh, Takamiyama was like the
Yep.
first big American, right?
Mhm.
I'll admit he's the first guy I would name off the top of my head, but yeah, like the first half.
Well,
of the
there's one
20th
there's one
century,
Didi and
right?
Akebono, and yeah.
Yeah, there's one before him who wrestled. So Takamiyama they always say that he was the first to make it to the top division. He was like the first American to make it to the top
Sure.
division.
It was
He
a
was
side
not
bonus.
he was not the first American to make it to the top division.
Oh.
The first American to make it to the top division was a Japanese American from Colorado. He was born in Colorado.
We covered this guy briefly on one of our super early episodes, Mac, but he didn't count as a foreigner, right?
Right. So in
Yeah.
Japan, they didn't consider him a foreigner, but he was born in America and he was an American citizen. And so he went over there and um actually it would make a great movie. Like it would make a great movie. He went over there and joined a stable and World War II broke out. And he was
did cover something like this.
yeah, and he was pressed into service for the Japanese army. And then he became, after the war, during the occupation, he was a translator for the Americans. So, and he stayed there for the rest of his life. Um, but it's stuff like that, like it's so cool. And I think people, anyway, so the goal of the book, I've kind of like rambled about different
You're
little
fine.
things.
I'm
But-
digging everything. I'm like, this is great. This is
Yeah,
fantastic.
but the goal, basically just what I want to do is like show people that like we have this really deep well of sumo history in our backyards. California was a hotbed of sumo in Los Angeles and San Francisco and Sacramento. Like it was they were taking teams. They were in the 1920s and 30s. There were collegiate sumo teams from Japan coming over to compete against like native born Japanese Americans that were living in America. They were coming over to compete against them in Los Angeles and San Francisco and Sacramento, and those guys were coming to Hawaii. Boats from Japan would pull into Hawaii and they'd be like, "Hey, we've got like 5 or 6 of our best guys in sumo on the boat. We want to challenge you guys, like some of you Hawaiian folks." And so they would have the mainland. There's newspaper. There was so noteworthy. Like the newspapers would cover this stuff, and so these guys get off the boat. They wrestle. They do like a best of everybody wrestles and they score it on like your team, however many points you guys accumulate.
Like a
Mhm.
wrestling
So-
made kind of a deal. Yeah.
Yeah. So the Japanese, this chaplain guy was a part of one of these, and uh, the mainland team lost the entire thing, like overall, but he beat their champion, like best 2 out of 3, at the end. And like, so, I mean, it's just neat little, there's just so much. And there's so many guys that you don't hear about that like made it up into the Juryo and Makuuchi ranks from Hawaii, that, you know, again, they were only there for like brief periods of time because of injury or whatever. Um, and I just want the story, like I just want the stories to be like readily available, so like it can be in the hands of
Needs
people
to
that
be
care
told.
about it. Yeah. And so it's going to take a lot of work. I'm like still in the early, I mean, I'm still very much in the early stages. And I was a
Stoked. I'm
little,
stoked. Where is it?
I
Give me
was
the
a
book.
little, I was a little apprehensive about like talking about it because I'm like, well, I don't want to like not, I don't want to like burn out and not follow through. And then
Right.
like I've talked about this whole thing,
Yeah.
but it's something I really want to do. And like I said, the information is there, and I'm just slowly putting it, um, into something that you know, I think will really benefit the community, hopefully, and inspire people. Because I mean, we just, you know, America, America has kind of been the um, I don't know, we've gotten pretty banged up in international competitions, and you know, there's lots of reasons for that, but we have such a history of it here that,
Oh yeah.
you know, um,
History wise, what do you think? Are we probably like number 3? I guess I feel like it would be silly to, as far as like history and sumo internationally. Obviously Japan, then probably I'd be silly to say that Mongolia hasn't passed into second place, but at
well,
least as
yeah,
far as at least
Yeah,
as far as professional sumo
I could see that.
success, I'd say we're number 3. But like, I don't know, man.
yeah.
It's
Well, as far as like the pros, I mean, there's not really any Americans over there right now.
Mhm.
yeah, not
I
anymore.
think, yeah, I don't think there are anymore right now.
Both of
I think,
the active Americans that we had in Musashi Gawabe are now retired.
yeah,
So Musashi Maru is
yes,
still coaching, but yeah, I don't think there's
yeah,
any active Americans.
yeah. So it's you know, it kind of fizzled out, and as far as us in the professional ranks, but I'm hoping, um, but yeah, we do have. I think next to Mongolia, like we do have kind of the bigger, you know, the biggest amount of history with sumo, and certainly on an amateur scale, um, you know, I think we do have. I just think we have a lot to be, I don't know if proud of is the right word, because it's not like any of us had anything to do with it, but I think we can take.
Inspired by. We can be
Yeah,
I
there you
inspired
think
go.
we
by.
can,
Inspired by.
yeah.
That's a good way to put it.
I think we can be inspired by, I don't know. I think you can be a little proud of like your fellow,
Sure.
like proud of it. Like it's not that you're like proud of yourself, but like you're proud to be in company with this you know, this,
Exactly.
you're proud of all these people and this legacy that you have, behind you, that you can kind of like grab the baton, and you know, that's kind of a
And
common way of
build off
thinking
of
of
it.
it.
Keep building, keep making it
Yeah.
better, keep improving on it, and keep growing.
Whether
Yeah.
you're continuing to wrestle or doing something even greater, like podcasting about the sport, things like that.
Exactly.
Exactly.
We're all
Everything
trying to
everybody
contribute to that legacy. Yeah.
Yes.
everything everybody does is like, you know, it's just making sumo. I mean, I've heard John Jock say this about like what people are doing, and you know, just anything you're doing that is pushing the sport forward, whether it's wrestling or podcasting or promoting it in any way you can, I think brings it in front of people's minds, and we have a great sport. Like it's a great sport, you know,
With a
and
fantastic community. It's a great sport,
fantastic community.
fantastic
Yeah.
community.
Yeah, and that's what I that and I so the real like reason, you know, the reason I want the book to be out there is, one, people should know about it, but I want it to be a benefit, to the community at large, because we do have a lot, um we have a lot of stories to share
Mhm.
as a community, and we can really, I think we can really, uh I think it can really inspire people to be able to look back and say, it's like the Texas guys. If you were to tell me, if I was from San Antonio and I was doing sumo and somebody came up to me and was like, "Did you know that there was a guy from San Antonio that wrestled?" Now, he was 3-0. That was his record. He retired
Sure.
shortly after,
But he did it.
but
It's
he
like
did it. And
Earthquake,
there's
the Canadian guy who went into pro wrestling. He went undefeated 3 tournaments and was like, no, this is really hard. I quit.
yeah,
I'm done.
exactly. So he was there. There's pictures of him in the stables. There's a picture of him arriving with a cowboy hat on in
Sweet.
Tokyo.
Get that
That's
picture to us.
awesome.
I want to
Yeah,
see if I can get that one on Twitter or
Yes.
something.
totally. And yeah, like these guys, you know, there was a kid from Los Angeles, in the same era as Takamiyama.
Cool.
Um, you know, his story is important. Like everybody's story is important. And I think if you're from an area where there was like just a little hint of sumo, just a little like nugget of sumo, um, you can feel I think it can make you feel better about what you're doing and you can like walk around with your head up instead of like feeling like you're trudging around like, oh, nobody understands this sport and blah 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 blah. And it's like, well, it doesn't matter because you've got 100 years of like people behind you like pushing you forward. So just like
Yep.
stay on, stay
Keep
stay
on.
on
Stay the
track and
course.
keep on going.
You mentioned him earlier, but one of the other guys that I like to bring up just because he also competed in my other favorite sport, MMA, but just from out of nowhere in the middle of St. Louis, Centuriu.
Yeah.
He's another one of like, he was like in the 90s. He certainly wasn't like, as successful as Akebono Musashi Maru, but like he made it to the top division. He was
He did.
perfectly successful there. Like if it wasn't for those other guys, he would have been a bigger story. But
Yeah.
yeah, St. Louis, like really? Okay. It's just like
Exactly.
San Antonio. Like there's little nuggets of inspiration and history all over the place. It's super cool.
There is, yeah, yeah, and we just need to like pick those up and carry them around with us, And
Mhm.
I think if it can all be, if I can, it's going to be a big task. I mean, I'm a little daunted
You've
by
been
it, but
talking about it on the podcast now. You can't back out.
Yep, exactly.
I can't
You're
back
committed.
out.
It's in the public record.
It might be a few years, but it's eventually going to happen because
Yeah.
it's so important.
Mhm.
History is like something I care deeply about. I'm a big history nut, and so um, it's like two favorite things colliding, like
Sure.
history and sumo. And
I hope Josh is listening to this too, because
Right.
I have talked about that extensively.
yeah, it's fun, and it's fun to like imagine like going back. I'm just imagine being an American in the 1850s, and like you're on this ship with Perry and you land in this foreign land that you're just like, what is going on here? And like, there's, just sights you've never seen. And all of a sudden there's these giant dudes. I mean, they describe these guys like there's these giant dudes that are just like, ripped and ready to fight. And like, you're like
Hey, punch
watching
me in the
them.
gut.
Yeah, it's
Hey,
like
come
see
here.
what
Exactly.
happens.
Come here,
Yeah.
punch this naked guy.
Hard as you can, like right here.
All right.
And like, and here they go like wrestling and like you wouldn't know it. I mean, yeah, I just that would have been an amazing thing to witness. Like
Yeah.
there's that question of like if you could witness anything in history, like what would you want to be present for, And people would say like, well, the moon, the launch of the moon, or whatever, or like I don't know, there's a ton, the signing of the Declaration of Independence or whatever,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I would say like in my top 5 historical events, like I would love to have been there the first time Americans saw sumo and just like
Punch me.
just see like to see that, to witness this cultural like collide. And I think Japan, we obviously have a bit of a sordid history with Japan
Little
as
fraught.
Americans, a little fraught.
No, just a little.
But we have but I think we have a lot to learn, I think we have a lot to learn from one another, and like, that cultural exchange is something that really fascinates me about the sport too, and certainly the Japanese way of going about things has influenced influenced me. And I don't. Again, it's one of these things. I think I posted a while back. It's like you can kind of get when you get into something like this. It becomes easy to want to try to like cosplay like you're a Japanese person, or or you somehow have like this really unique insight into a culture that you really don't know anything about.
Mm.
And so I've just always tried to approach sumo with kind of eyes wide open, and realize that like I'm not Japanese. I never will be.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not trying to be,
Mm-hmm.
but I think what we can all do is we can embody some of that culture and some of that spirit in the way that we go about sumo. Um, and so that to me is like the goal. If
Yeah,
you can do that and like feel like you're doing that with respect, and realizing that they've given us a really great gift, and that is the sport. And we're kind of we get to be the caretakers of it here in our homeland. And so what we do with that, I think, is really important. So
That's
absolutely.
awesome.
Yeah, no, that's a really good, really great point. Like we will never be Japanese, but we can be worldly Americans,
Mhm.
and sumo is one of the coolest ways to get into learning about a culture that's pretty different from ours. So
it really is. It really is. I think anybody that wants to understand Japan should study sumo. At least have a have a crash course,
But
and
it's
what?
so cool. It's so
But
rad.
what if they want to get a hold of you guys personally and the guys at Ohayo Sumo? It's like, how can
Yeah,
they
yeah.
learn more
So
about your club? How can they interact with you and Darius and everybody else? No, what can they do?
they can find us on Instagram. So that's one of the main places, Ohio Sumo on Instagram. And then Ohio Sumo on Facebook, there's a page, and then there's also a page for the Dayton branch, Ohio
Oh,
Sumo
newly
Dayton,
founded Dayton
the
branch.
newly founded Dayton branch. And I have to say, I have to shout out to Ben Lacey. He really took that on, and I think he mentioned that, and part of it was like, I don't want to drive so far.
yeah, that's a
But
big one.
but he really we told him, man, we were like, man, go ahead, and like, if you want to, we felt strongly about keeping like Ohio Sumo as like, you know, the name or whatever. And he was really into that, and like, but he really has like, it's become, it's become his baby over there. And he really, I'm just really proud of everything he's done for the club, and for all the guys that come to the Dayton practices, because he's really, yeah, I'm just really really proud of the way he's gone about all of that. So shout out to him for
They have
really.
an incredibly photogenic practice location as
Yes.
well that makes
Oh,
for
it's
some
great over there.
excellent
Yeah,
Instagram
it's great over
posts.
there. I was there yesterday practicing, and
Awesome.
yeah, it was it's always like, you just feel really, the only thing that's missing is like the dirt floor, like
Mm.
the
Yeah.
dirt, if you
Oh
had
man,
that in
we
there.
didn't even get to that. Like we got to have you on again sometime soon to talk about because you built an
You built
actual
your own.
dirt dohyo, right?
I did, yeah. I did, and yeah, it's not hard. it's not, it's it's not as hard as you might think. It's really not.
Yeah. Is it one of those things that's simple but just takes time, takes
It's
effort?
simple, but it just takes a little bit. If
Yeah.
you can do it with a tiller. All you need is a tiller and some rakes and a couple of hose, and like just get it all. You basically till a square, um, and then you mark out your boundary line, and then
Mhm.
you start packing dirt around in that center part. Get all the grass and stuff that you tilled up and everything out of there, and just like really clean it out. And then you just start pounding the dirt down. Go get your like 20 bags of like all-purpose sand, and like fill that thing up with sand, smooth it all out, pack it all in, work it in with the dirt. Um, and that seemed to work really well for us.
Yeah. It looks
It seemed
real
to work
neat.
really
It
well.
does look
Yeah.
outstanding.
Well,
It's
hey, I
nice.
mean, since you described that, yeah, I guess we don't have to have you back on. If it's that simple, we're good.
It's just really that simple. We did buy Darius had bought the Tawara.
Oh yeah.
So it's like bags, like little canvas bags, and you'll need sand for those. So you fill those with sand, and then you place those around, and so that's what we did, and those come from Japan, those Tawara bags, and you can get them from I think you can get them from USA Sumo, and yeah, so we did that. We'll have practices out there, like when the weather's nice. Just all get together, and that's the best. That's the best of times. Like, I love just being out there, and you just, like, it's hot, you sweat, and, like, you really feel like you're working, you know?
Yeah.
So
I know a couple of the other clubs like to train outdoors in the summer, and that just seems like an extra level of purity to it, you know, an extra level of, like, you know,
Commitment.
traditional fun.
This is what we do.
Yeah.
honestly,
Really
it when you're on the dirt, there's something really, I don't want to get too, like, you know, woohoo about it, but there is something, like, there's a different feeling. Like, you feel really grounded and, like, really connected to the, you know, because, like, it's like nature at, like, its purest form. Like, you're naked for one, and then you're like, and then you're like fighting another naked person on the dirt, like, in the dirt.
In
And
nature.
so, in nature, like, and so it's really kind of like a visceral kind of, like,
primal
feeling.
Yeah, I was about to say, it's
primal
just a
primal
gut
feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah, really primal element to it, and it really, like, amps you up. I feel it really is kind of like,
that is so cool.
Yeah.
Well, if you're not hyped about sumo now, get hyped now.
Yeah.
Get in with nature. It's
follow Ohayo Sumo on Instagram as the weather warms up. We'll see some more we'll see some more nearly naked men fighting in the outdoors as God intended.
As God intended. Yes.
But I guess until then, we'll wait to hear from you until you're working on the modern section of your sumo history book and you need the GSB chapter to fill out.
Of course.
You know, get back in touch. But
that's gonna be probably, like, the last, like, quarter of the book, like,
taking sumo into the future. Great sumo breakdown. No, I got you. Yeah, I see where we're going.
Exactly. Yeah, I'll need biographies of you guys and, like, baby photos, and, like,
we can get you covered there.
There's some cringeworthy high school photos out there of all of us. I'm pretty sure.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for joining us, Jake. And we absolutely want to have you guys back on whenever we can. Not that, like Max said before, we don't play favorites. Everybody we talk to, we also want to talk to again.
Exactly.
But yeah, like we also said, there's so many great stories out there. There's so much to cover.
Yeah.
And
it's true.
We do hope to see you again soon. And thanks again for joining us. Once you get back to managing those 5 kids, which sounds just exhausting to me.
It's not too bad. Thanks, guys. I
suppose
appreciate
they're
it.
cute, aren't they?
Yeah.
They are cute. Yeah.
Take care, man.
Yeah. Thanks. Go Cyclones.
Yes.
Thank you for listening to Grand Sumo Breakdown. Until next time,
Throw your salt high
and keep moving forward.